Good morning, everyone. My name is Elisabetta Caterina Giovannini, and I am a postdoc researcher at the Department of Architecture and Design at Politecnico di Torino in Italy. Today, I will present an ongoing project to develop a ResearchSpace knowledge system for digital architectural representation in cultural heritage. The developed knowledge system can be considered an output of a previous project, Back to the Future. That project was a collaborative project between Politecnico di Torino and the Museo Egizio Foundation in Turin to develop a comprehensive system of knowledge regarding a collection of wood maquettes stored in the depots of the museum. The project, entitled Beam Acquisition as Cultural Key to Transfer Heritage of Ancient Egypt for Many Uses to Many Users Replayed, was an interdisciplinary project that involved several people with different backgrounds. The team was composed of all architects, but we are specialized in diverse disciplines. So historians investigate the collection history and gathered their archival and photographical documentation. The geomatics team did the digital acquisition of the museum collection, and the digital representation specialist worked on the post-production of the digital acquisition for the 3D web publishing, and the data manager were involved in the creation of a database system for collect all research data. Here you can see the workflow of the project. As you can see, we developed different outputs for the Back to the Future project. Now I am migrating all this data in our ResearchSpace knowledge system. So regarding the collection, as I said, the museum collection is almost entirely stored in the depots of Museo Egizio in Turin, even if some models are exhibited in the Nubian room of the museum. Within the project, the collection was renamed and entitled Expedition Model of Egyptian Architecture, and consists of 15 wooden architectural models, originally including 14 models of temples or part of the same, and one of an obelisk. Each model is considered in the collection management system of the museum a single item with its distinctive inventory number, and the reference to the whole collection is barely perceivable. The models were comprehended within Drovetti's collection that was transferred from Alexandria in Egypt to Turin via Livorno and Genoa, and considered for this reason already a little museum collection of items. Just to point that Drovetti Museum has largely formed the collection of Museo Egizio in Turin. The wooden models are covered by plaster and painted, and they were assembled with different kind of wood and fixed with wax. In recent years, they also suffered various restoration, and these objects are intended to represent at that time something new, and they were intended as a means to reproduce an image of Egypt that at that time, in the early 18th century, was unknown in European visions. The models remains in Egypt in bad state of conservation until the 1823, and they were already treated as something standing by themselves, to the point that in a first moment they were not included in the transportation to Museo Egizio with the rest of the Egyptian antiquities. This because they were not made by Egyptian culture, but they were a representation of something that was there. So they were a representation of architectural monuments that stand along the River Nile. Within the Okurti catalog of 1852, the architectural models had a specific section and specific order, and this happened also for other catalogs and inventories. But now we miss the sense of this collection and are considered just object, okay? So one of the core of the research was to recreate the sense of the collection of these 15 models. Regarding the narrative purposes, we started with the authorship, with the investigation of the authorship of the collection. A first assumption was made by Silvia Einaudi in 2016 in a publication entitled Rifo, Drovetti e I modellini del Museo Egizio di Torino, and she made an assumption that probably Jean-Jacques Rifo was the maker of these models. And her assumptions were based on the hieroglyphical transcription of from the handmade drawings of Rifo, the models, and the original one. But we thought that we cannot assume that the model were constructed by Rifo, but probably we can assume that the model were constructed from his drawings, probably by some improvised carpenter because of the material used and the wrong use of dimensions indicated in the drawings. Because at the beginning of 19th century, expedition in Egypt were a practice linked to conscious discovery the far away. And so we know that Jean-Jacques Rifo joined the expedition of Bernardino Drovetti through Nubia and Egypt along the Nile. And so we know that probably Jean-Jacques Rifo saw these temples and made this architectural representation that for us are sections, okay? And so we can compare this section with the half part of, for example, here, two models. Jean-Jacques Rifo also was one of the first explorers that tried to publish a volume regarding the Egyptian culture. So he published a volume, Voyage en Égypte and Nubia at Lieu Circonvence. And for this reason, we choose this book as a reference documentation to enrich the information about the collection and to try to make a storytelling about the story of this maquette, of drawings of Jean-Jacques Rifo and of planches, because the oeuvre of Jean-Jacques Rifo was composed by several number of planches regarding natural history, physics, archaeology, and also planche description. So within his several planches, we found those that represents our maquettes. We also identify not only the planches that were made by lithographer for the published volume, but also the handmade drawings from Jean-Jacques Rifo that are stored in the Bibliothèque of Genève. And we try to make a provenance of information between the original drawings, the construction of the layout of the planches, and the description of building. As you can see here, we have plans and made models and made drawings, our maquette, and the original temple. So So the project involved the construction of a relational database. We choose to use a relational database because of Museo Egizio already have a relational database, and so we wanted to build something that was that could be interoperable with their systems. So in practical term, we integrating existing data about the collection without modifying the database of Museo Egizio. We establish a conceptual data model to carry out the creation of new records suitable for documenting the historical research and taking into account the link between different kinds of sources. And we also tried to document the digitization process related to the artifacts, so related to the digital acquisitions. So here the database structure. And after that, for doing this database, we every time take in my mind that this database should be standard and CIDOC CRM mapped in some way. So I started to create tables, okay, making a relationship between source and the element that, in my case, can be mapped with CIDOC CRM. And we started from this. So this was the export of the database, so the export of the information that Museo Egizio has about the model, so it's quite empty. I mean, there are only few information, so I started to map it, this information, and then I started to build other data set to, for example, describe the relationship between all these kind of sources. In this case, I use the CIDOC CRM inf to make an assumption about the name of the temple depicted by the model, because in the planche there were another name that it was a temple of Contralatopolis, but nowadays this name is not any more conventional name for that place. So another work that we did is like analyze all text and information and sources and how places were entitled in different types, and we choose the current name of the place for that temple to encode to rename actually the model, okay? So here again, starting from the relational database, I use the ResearchSpace knowledge system, in this case the image graph authoring, to define a knowledge map system for conceptualize the concept of place textual elements. And so I can annotate image and create relationship between information that are in the plans and the entire system, okay? So using this sort of image annotation, I can make all the information about the plans searchable by the system. And this was made, of course, using CIDOC CRM classes and properties. As I said before, again, here we have, for example, a conceptual model for conceptualizing the architectural representation that are carried on the planche. And as you can see, the interface of the cell space says us that this planche carries architectural representation and planche textual elements. So in this way, I can collect all the information, and I can also know what I see. Okay, what I see in the plans, and this is the core of was the core of the research, to identify architectural element inside plans and also inside the documentation available for creating narratives and and contents about the research. Again, here there is another conceptual model to explain how we identify different drawings inside the plans, and this is also the main conceptual schema to attach to these informations the original and made drawings made by RFO. Again, we also wanted to link textual information about these drawings, because, as I said, the RFO project, the RFO Oeuvre, consisted of planche with their description, and we noticed that in the description, Jean-Jacques Riffaud put some symbols that attach the description with its drawing. Okay, so we wanted to collect this, and this is still ongoing, but we want to use the semantic narrative tool of ResearchSpace, for example, to include the transcription of the text and the translation of the text in Italian and English. Regarding the digitization process, we also wanted to map this. So the relational database was suitable to be mapped into CIDOC according to CRM-DIC. And in this case, also, we wanted to put all this inside ResearchSpace. So we annotate all the formal derivation of the object. So the digital acquisition. After the digital acquisition, there are so many processes that start from the original data to the final output. And in this case, we see how which are the products of the digitization processes. So each model was composed by 2 or 3 parts, and we can make the relationship between planche, original drawing, and the maquette and its digital acquisition. For the 3D web publishing, so ResearchSpace, it doesn't provide at that time a solution for published 3D models. So we use the 3DOP, that is a 3D heritage online presenter, and it is an open source framework for the creation of interactive web presentation of high resolution 3D models oriented to the cultural heritage field. And 3DOP allow the creation of interactive visualization of 3D model directly inside a standard web page, just adding some HTML and JavaScript components. And so it was quite easy to use. This is the first prototype of a web page of the project, and this was developed using 3DOP and using as repo a GitHub account. As you can see, 3DOP allows to visualize the model in different ways, using texture, not texture, making measures, and also it allows you to make sections. And so, in this case, to clarify the relationship between the model and its section. Okay. Finally, we put the HTML code and all this data inside the ResearchSpace, and so now we can use ResearchSpace as a comprehensive knowledge system of the research, including the 3D models. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elisabetta. That was a really interesting presentation, and let's open the... Oh boy, I need some technical help with this one. I managed to mess it up. But I have a question while Antero checks if there are any questions in the workshop, or does any of you? Oh, wonderful. Yes. Can you pass the microphone? Thanks. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Should I just go for the question? Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. I think our project have really much in common because we also deal with multimodal sources, including 3D data. And I have a question regarding ResearchSpace, because we tried it out last year for our project and we faced some difficulties regarding the performance. So I wanted to ask you if you would say it is a really proper and nice functioning tool, or did you maybe perceive some limits for, in terms of ResearchSpace? Thanks.
Okay, for me that I'm no an IT expert, but I have a background in representation, so for me it's a very good way to see what I'm going to connect and the way on how the system create the database. Just using visualization for me is amazing, okay? But I know that probably there are some problems about migrating data from existing relational database to ResearchSpace. In fact, in my case, I present just only a sort of redoing of the database, because I tried to manage the image detection tool. So in that case, it wasn't possible to migrate the data, so I needed to redo the things, but I already have my database with all information, so it was quite fast. And I also think that my collection, the collection of the project was very small, so just 15 objects, okay, and other drawings and plans, but not so many items. So for me it was easily, and as I show you, the database of the Museology is still about a single model. It was quite empty, very poor. I mean, just the dimensional information, the material information. I think that probably will be more complex for migrating huge database and a huge collection inside it, but it's something that I would like to do because I still miss other tables that are not regarding image notation, and for that I would like to use, as I understand from Dominic Ullman, a sort of a knowledge mapping that allows you to migrate directly using a conceptual reference model my tables inside ResearchSpace, but I didn't try it until now, so I don't know.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else in the audience who would like to ask questions? Or online? Not yet, but you still have some time. I wanted to ask also a tech question, because that's kind of easy to come up with. I have been following some of the 3D projects, and we have been using Sketchfab, but this is the first time I heard about this 3D hop, which is made for cultural heritage. So can you just say a few words of that?
Okay, yes, 3D Hop is a software that, a tool that came up with MeshLab, that is an open source framework to manage point cloud meshes and 3Ds. It was developed by the National Council of Research in Italy, and it has its characteristic is that it allows you not to load the entire model in one time, but to load the model and the texture when you zoom on it. So it quite kind of allow you to visualize the model with a very high resolution texture, but without using all the data space in the internet. I don't know how to say it. In Sketchfab, as I understand, when you visualize the model, you visualize all the model entire. Even if you zoom it, the model and the texture is already visualized at once. But with 3DOP, when you zoom it, you like reload the model. And when you zoom on, also the texture is reloaded. So this is quite useful, for example, in restoration processes when you need to have a very high quality texture for identifying restoration gaps and surface materials that are missing. I don't know, something like that.
Thank you. This is something I really appreciate in these meetings, because you meet people who have tried something you have never even heard about and will be able to compare to you. And I was already hearing that you have some interest of finding people who are doing similar type of research. So please contact her now by the questions or later on. But I will not yet let you go from here. I still have another question, which is about the information in the knowledge base. When you started talking about Egyptian Museum, I thought, oh, this is like she's bringing greetings from an old friend, because 6 years ago, a CIDOC was hosted by the Egyptian Museum. And the director, Christian Greco, he was talking in one of CIDOC's workshops and mentioning how he's really passionate of opening the research data. So it's really nice to get a follow-up on what has been happening during the past few years. And you were telling about the knowledge base and availability of the information. To whom it is available, and do you know? Is it for researchers? Or public?
The intent was first for researchers, but also for the large public. Actually, the system ran in our server of Politecnico, because, of course, during the research, we encountered the fact that some of our documentation is from the Bibliothèque of Genève. So we still have to make some I don't know, collaborative system also with them, because they are quite involved in this project. Not only Egyptian Museum objects and research, but it regards also another collection of things. So I think that probably we have to contact them to publish it, if it's possible, of course.
Great, thank you. Do you have something for the larger public also, of the collections of the research?
Yes, from now there is the ResearchSpace website, where you can find the old version of the 3DOP 3D models, and something about historical documentation, and also an app developed by CNR that allow you to make a game between the 3D model and the planche. Yes, but it's not about ResearchSpace in that case. But these were some outputs that we developed.
Thank you. It is always nice to see that projects go forward and they do have outputs. Thank you, Elisabetta.